We have yet more injury updates for the Chicago Bears, and we're going to talk about and ask the question today. Is it time for the Bears to switch the focus, to start focusing on draft and acquisition acquirement mode? We're going to talk about all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
What's going on, Bears fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bears Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related. I'm fighting the cold. It is what it is. I'm losing my voice. We're going to power through, though, for this episode. And make sure you guys are following the show at Chi Bears Central on every social media platform. You can also send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns at chicagobearscentral@gmail.com. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get into the content for today. And first up, we're going to be talking about the injury update. So we already heard about Justin Fields and him expected to miss this upcoming Sunday's game, if not more. But we got more added to the injury report on top of that. So Nate Davis is also going to be missing some time. And it looks like Terrell Smith is also going to be missing at least next week's game as well. This is unfortunate for a team that has dealt with injury concerns literally since the preseason. Since before the season even opened, we've been having injury concerns and players out with this team. And the fact of the matter is we just have not had a year where we've been able to really build any type of consistent continuity between, different aspects and parts of this roster and team. So the offensive line, the secondary, they've been the most drastically affected by that. Linebacking core has been pretty healthy since the start of the season. Wide receivers as well, outside of Chase Claypool, the games that he missed, but we know that was due to more than injury. But at the end of the day, this team has its injury issues, and it's going to be the story of the season, which really feeds into the next topic kind of that I want to talk to. But before we get into that, just with the flashes, how good this offensive line looked at times once Nate Davis and Tevin Jenkins came back. And keep in mind, Tevin Jenkins isn't 100% healthy yet. They're still ramping him up, things like that. It's been unfortunate. This was a season where you really wanted to take a look to evaluate that offensive line. We knew we still got work. Center position, still got tons of work to do at that center position. May even need to look at an offensive tackle in the upcoming draft. But the excitement that was surrounding the Chicago Bears team coming in, it went left real quick, real early, right? And not to say that it's going to come back this season. I mean, anything's possible, right? But it's highly unlikely that the Bears turn this thing around. And we're going to be looking at yet another year where the Bears are going to have some high draft picks, one of their own, one from the Carolina Panthers. And the Bears are going to have to look to make some decisions, right? I think center has to be something that they address early as long as the talent's there, right? You have a player like Marvin Harrison Jr., who I think the Bears absolutely need to be focused on. I've said it before, Jared Verse and Marvin Harrison Jr. are the two players that I would love the Bears to walk away from in the first round this year with their 2 first-round picks. I know a lot of Bears fans are looking at Caleb Williams. When it comes down to that part of it, right, I guess we'll go ahead and get into this conversation. The next thing that I wanted to talk about with this team is at what point is it time for the Bears to shift their focus from, really at trying to salvage the season and switch it more to acquisition mode and start focusing on prioritizing the upcoming NFL draft, right? And because of that, they have a couple of different things that they can look at. Now, when it comes to Caleb Williams, I know a lot of Bears fans are really hoping and thinking that that's going to be what fixes it. I've said it before. The Bears, I doubt that they pull the plug on Justin Fields yet. I know some Bears fans really hope that they do, and they think that Caleb Williams is the answer. And I'm here to tell you guys, Caleb Williams is not the answer to solving what's going on with the Chicago Bears. If coaching is not fixed, right, that's a big thing that you need. You don't fix up and shore up your offensive line. You don't get more weapons. We're going to be looking at the same thing. And, this upcoming week with Tyson Bagent starting, we're going to look at, what a different quarterback, maybe that may drill that point home. Maybe it may make me reevaluate that point, right? But when it comes down to it, I think sooner rather than later, and especially with the trade deadline coming up in just 2 weeks, the Chicago Bears really need to think about shifting their focus towards acquisition mode. And that means really evaluating what is the future for some of the players on this team. We talked about last week how Courtney Cronin came out with the fact that the Bears are listening to offers for both Jalen Johnson and Eddie Jackson. And I think that, Jalen Johnson's still young, still kind of fits the timeline of this team, in my opinion. When you look at Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon, Terrell Smith, those guys being in that secondary and maybe growing with him, right? You got Jaquan Brisker, who's an absolute dog. But you could look, rather than to get into a contract negotiation situation, you could look to potentially go ahead and move on from him to see what you can get back, right, in Jalen Johnson. Now, when it comes to Eddie Jackson, that may be a tougher decision for the Chicago Bears for a couple of different reasons. One, Eddie Jackson has had a problem with staying healthy in the last few seasons. He's about to be on the other side of 30. And while I love Eddie Jackson on this team, and I've said it very consistently, I think Eddie Jackson was on pace for a Pro Bowl level season last year before he got hurt. But that's last year. We're in this year now. And once again, we're having injury concerns with Eddie Jackson. No, the problems with the defense all on him. And that may be why we don't see heavy movement at this trade deadline. If Ryan Poles does plan to make some coaching changes, we may not see heavy moves at the trade deadline. But if the Bears were to switch into acquisition mode, getting to see what you can get back for a player like Eddie Jackson, who, has had some issues staying healthy. He's only played in half the games so far this season, but is 29, has a bright future, still has plenty of time left in the NFL. You may have to evaluate that trade market and that trade value, because if you can get something back that you feel like you can get something to help this team on, right? And it would come with the Bears shifting focus. I really do think, I know some Bears fans have thought that this team has been intaken and maybe this was part of the plan. It wasn't part of the plan, right? But if the Bears shift from saying, hey, we're probably about a year or two away from making the playoffs, players like Eddie Jackson, players like Jalen Johnson who are up for these deals potentially or getting older, you could look to shift that focus and get a little bit younger, right? And get some acquisitions. And I do think that Eddie Jackson is a player that I'm not necessarily saying the Bears should trade, but he is a player that the Bears could look to trade and move if the right deal is available. I think the same thing of Yannick Ngakoue, right? We brought in Yannick because the Bears and Yannick both were sitting there. The Bears needed a pass rusher. Yannick Ngakoue, a lot of teams had passed up on him. He's been in a similar situation before where he signed with, I believe it was the Vikings, and then ended up getting moved. I may be wrong on the teams there, but that could be what the Bears do as well. Teams didn't sign him, but a team now that's fighting for some playoff spots that may have a need for a pass rusher. They already have a solid enough defensive line. Maybe you can get something. I'm not saying you can get anything huge back. It'll probably end up being like a 6-rounder or something. But the Bears at some point, they have to ask themselves, is it time to just start acquiring all the assets that we can get potentially so we can really knock this upcoming draft out the park, right? They already are slated to have the second most cap space in the NFL again next season. They added the most cap space this past offseason. So the Bears could have a lot of things at their disposal and a lot of flexibility in what they do, right? Now, that would mean that Ryan Poles has to make a decision, or already has to have in the back of his mind what he plans on doing with the coaching staff, right? Because if you don't plan on moving on the coaching staff, even though I don't see in a world how you aren't looking to move on from this coaching staff, but let's say he isn't looking to move on from this coaching staff, we may be, instead of sending out assets, we may be in a point where we're trying to just sign all the players that we can, draft really well. But if you're moving on to a different head coach, you're changing the timeline to say, all right, well, now we're going to another head coach, we're going to another offensive coordinator. Let's kind of reconstruct this to where we're getting young players in here, more young players in here that may not be big-time contributors right away, even though with 2 first-round picks, you better get guys that can contribute on day one, right? I think that the Bears need that as well, but they may shift that focus. They got some decisions to make with the upcoming trade deadline. Players that I do think that the Bears could either be shopping or listening to offers on are Jalen Johnson and Eddie Jackson, which we already heard rumors on. Yannick Ngakoue is another one, and this may be a shocker to some Bears fans. I think that Darnell Mooney is another player that the Bears could look to listen to offers on, not necessarily actively try to move, but could listen to what's out there. Now, Darnell Mooney has not had the statistical seasons that, we wanted the last 2 seasons. He just hasn't. He hasn't had that impact. But if you're looking around the league and a team needs an additional wide receiver to add a different dynamic to the team, Darnell Mooney could be moved as well because, listen, the Bears are probably going to be in a position to be able to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. You also have Tyler Scott, another young player that you felt comfortable in, right? That's even some rumors like he's a very similar makeup player to Darnell Mooney that, we've seen some flashes of already. The Bears could, go a little bit younger, decide to do that, have Marvin Harrison Jr. down there, pair him with DJ Moore. You have a dynamic 1 and 2 punch there, and then maybe Tyler Scott, or you feel like you can sign somebody else, develop those guys along as well. So, again, these aren't things that I'm saying that the Bears are going to actively look to just by the trade deadline. You got to get off these contracts, but it really depends on how the focus for the Chicago Bears and Ryan Poles and Kevin Warren, what does that become now going forward with this season being what it ended up becoming? And that is another losing season where it's a lot of tough decisions need to be made about forging the future for the Chicago Bears team. And listen, that's the job that Ryan Poles accepted. That's the job that Kevin Warren accepted. It's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. Right now, we are in shit and despair. And until this team is ready to make the tough decisions, and that may come by moving some players that you hope to, right? And, I'm not saying that, contrary to some Bears fans' belief, I don't think the Bears look to move Justin Fields. I don't think they look to move Cole Kmet yet. I think they're invested in those players, but you have to ask yourself, are you bringing in the right offensive coordinator next year, the right offensive system to get the most out of these guys, or are we going to have another season of dog shit, right? That's what you have to ask yourself. And so, the Caleb Williams portion of this is a conversation that Bears fans are right to have, right? And I get it, that especially if the Bears do end up with the number 1 overall pick and trade out of it again and decide again to run it back and give Justin Fields another chance, there is going to be a large part of the Chicago Bears community that absolutely think that Ryan Poles is making the wrong decision, and they aren't going to be happy about it. But you have to choose your direction, choose your path, right? And once you do that, you have to double down on that, and you have to see that out of what it's going to be. Are you going to go another season and changing the offensive coordinator, changing a head coach, and then think, hey, this is the last go we feel for Justin. We're going to give him the weapons. We're going to drastically improve this offensive line. Hopefully they're going to spend more money on offensive line than what they did this last year and solidify those things up to evaluate them? Or have you made your decision and your call on Justin Fields at that point in time? You got to start asking those questions. It's a tough decision to be in, and it's not as easy as some Bears fans think that it is. It's just not as easy as some Bears fans think. I know we sit from this point of view and perspective and just like to think, hey, this is what they should do. Hell, even me in the seat. But it's not as easy as what we would think, right? And so tough decisions also got to be made. Some of the players on this team are absolutely leaving this team and don't need to come back. Justin Jones, out of there. I think we've seen enough. Cody Whitehair also is another player that got to go. Larry Bourne is a player that I think that this Bears team really did look at as a player that could be versatile on that offensive line. But then you got to ask yourself that question as well. Do you still see that potential? Do you still think that you're going to get that out of him? Next one up, Dominique Robinson, which I don't think there's any way in this world that Dominique Robinson, you have to upgrade. I don't even know, as good as he looked as a depth piece at one point in time, I think that at this point, you kind of got to understand that even if he does turn into a depth piece again for you, you need players so much better than him on that edge and as that edge rusher. And that's why, like I said, Jared Verse, Marvin Harrison Jr. are my picks, what I would love the Bears to come out of this first round with. We'll see if that ends up happening, but the Bears are in a tough position right now. And I don't think Caleb Williams, I don't think any of those players are going to save the Bears. You need to make sure you get the most assets to update your trenches and other spots on this team. But we'll end up seeing. Let me know what you guys think on all that down below. Make sure you guys are following the show at Shy Bear Central. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, ChicagoBearCentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number 1 spot for everything Chicago Bears related. Thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, Chi-Town up, but bear down. Love you guys. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.